This episode is brought to you by some amazing people. Patrick O'Leary, Marcel Gouffonian Metalhead, Nutslap, Tabin Rice. Welcome to the show. Living Life Consciously with Hello Allie, Gemini Moon, Space Baby, Mythoclast, Ray B, Gene G-Force Star, Moody Mongol, Lisa B, Fur 3 Norm, Grey Wolf, and Joanne, Shelley Montgomery, Aaron's Energy 313, Multifaceted Jules, Eric Booth, The Diz Loki, Nathan from the Quantum Show, Gary T, T-Bone, Richard and Fern Harrison, Eddie Tab, Mecca Mickey, Diane Boss, and Jeanette Angel. And a special thank you to all of our subscribers on YouTube, Spotify, and now on Rumble. If you wish to support the podcast, you can hit that join button below to become an Eyes to That Sky member. Or if you want to join the Patreon or to provide other support, the links are below in the show description. But now, on with the show. Welcome to the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast, where we explore the unexplained and mysterious phenomena that have occurred throughout the state of Michigan and beyond.
From UFO sightings to ghostly encounters, we delve deep into the stories, the evidence, and the theories behind these strange events.
We are your hosts. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Wayne.
We are an educator duo that after an encounter with a triangular UFO in 2018 in Michigan, we decided to investigate UFOs and the paranormal. In this podcast, we will be speaking with eyewitnesses, experts, and researchers to uncover the truth about some of the most intriguing cases of paranormal activity in and around Michigan.
Our goal is not to convince anyone of the existence of these phenomena, but rather to provide a platform for discussion and exploration. So, buckle up and join us on this journey down the paranormal rabbit hole.
On an escalator.
All right. Hello, everyone. It is
the end of spring break.
Yes. With all endings comes new beginnings. And that is the beginning countdown to summer vacation. But it is Sunday, March 30th, 2025. And we're coming to you from deep within our bunker in the shadow of the great Motor City, Detroit, Michigan, as we are dealing with a very stormy evening. But we want to thank you for joining us on this very special episode with Alex Aldea and Dave Ferrigno, creators and co-host of the YouTube channel Brothers of the Arcana. We're talking Freemasonry, esotericism, and the paranormal, or something close to that. So we'll see how this goes. Hold on tight, but as always, let's do some quick announcements. Michelle, take it away.
Don't forget, if you have a story that you would like to share with us, or if you need to email the podcast, you can do so at mi.ufo.podcast@gmail.com.
That's right. Also, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so with PayPal, Super Chats, buy us a coffee, check out our merchandise store, or join the Patreon. All of those links can be found below in the show description. And if you decide to become a YouTube member or a Patreon member, you will get a shout out during the intro to the show and be listed in the credits at the end of the show as a special thank you for your support.
So, and also don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and share out the show. Share us out.
Share it out. Share it out. And speaking of subscribing, so we've gotten more subscribers, but we've also gotten more viewers, which totally skewed our numbers. So now we are sitting at 57% of you watching us right now or watching our saved shows are not subscribed. It just helps us out a lot if you could just hit that subscribe button for us. And if you like our content, hit that notification bell so you will be alerted when we go live and post new videos. So,
and
Michelle,
next week, if you guys are ready for this one, April 6th, 2025, we are going to have on
Ooh.
Lynn Monet
Yes.
joining us for a haunting conversation.
Yes.
So make sure to set your notifications for that discussion.
And yeah, that's going to be awesome. She's gone through a lot, her and her family, and we're going to talk about that and the attacks of the supernatural type. So Michelle, go ahead and let's talk. Who's in chat?
Oh, let's see. I got to say hello to Diane Boss, Kelly Lewis, Rick Davis, Nathan from the Quantum Show, Straw Dog is here, Tabin is here, Sir Brian Bowden is here. We'll talk about that song later, sir.
We're going to have a little discussion, sir.
I do. Sarah Stafford has joined us as well.
Yep. So, all right, everybody, thank you for joining us. And I think with that being said, we should just go ahead and get into this.
Get the guys on.
Actually, you know what?
That is true.
Yeah, they sent us their bios, so we might as well read them.
We do.
All right, English teacher, go ahead.
Well, first I'm going to talk about Alex.
All right.
So, co-host of Brothers of the Arcana podcast, Alex Aldea is a dynamic force in law, media, and personal development. I can't talk. I haven't been talking in front of the kids. So, as co-host of Brothers of the Arcana, he explores esoteric wisdom, personal transformation, and the deeper mysteries of life, engaging listeners in thought-provoking discussions that challenge societal norms and inspire self-reflection. A licensed attorney with over 14 years of experience, Alex has thrived in diverse roles, including commissioner of the Patterson Film and Entertainment Commission and a leader in legal recruiting. A nationally recognized speaker and author, he helps men unlock their fullest potential through self-discovery and sacred space practices. A dedicated Freemason and former Grand Chaplain of New Jersey, Alex's work is deeply informed by his passion for spiritual and philosophical exploration. As a world traveler, he seeks out sacred spaces and wisdom from gurus, medicine men, and esoteric traditions across the globe. With Brothers of the Arcana, he blends ancient wisdom with modern challenges, tackling topics from the Knights Templar to universal laws and the intersection of science and mysticism.
People can't see him in the background. He's doing some silly stuff in the green room.
Off the mic, Alex enjoys writing and mentoring others on their path to personal freedom and fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a full plate.
Yes, he does.
And then we have Dave joining us, co-host Brothers of the Arcana podcast. Dave Ferrigno is a longtime paranormal investigator and co-host of the show, a podcast diving into UFOs, ancient civilizations, cryptids, the paranormal, and esoteric mysteries. A dedicated Freemason and member of multiple initiatic orders, he pursues the hidden truths of the universe through exploration, enlightenment, and ancient wisdom. With relentless curiosity and a fearless spirit, Dave challenges conventional thought, bridging the seen and unseen while inspiring others on their own journeys of self-discovery and spiritual awakening. Off the mic, Dave enjoys hitting the gym, golf, mentoring individuals, traveling the world, tactical training, fine cigars, motorsports, diving deep into history, searching for the truth, and he's a foodie.
All right, so let's go ahead and bring them on. Dave and Alex. Hello, gentlemen.
Good evening. Hello, Wayne and Michelle. How are you guys doing?
Hello. Is that one of the fine cigars?
No, it's incense.
It's incense. Actually,
we've replaced our cigar smoking with incense.
Hey.
So
okay.
We find it helps in focusing sort of what we're going to be talking about at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes. And I was thinking to myself, well, what a phenomenal bio we seem to have, and Michelle's doing a great job of reading it, and that tripped me up to that song Phenomenon, and then I started going Phenomenon. Dun, 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 dun.
No. Oh my gosh. Doing the Muppets.
Was it Muppets or Sesame Street?
No, that was Muppets. That's Jim Henson's creation.
Maybe they're doing that in the Iraqi version of the Sesame Street.
I didn't know there
Ferrigno.
was one. That's a new one on me.
Well, we paid $20 million for it, according to Doge.
Yes, we
So-
did. Yeah,
We
I
paid
was just
$20 million
thinking,
for an Iraqi version of Sesame Street. Why did we pay for it? That
because
doesn't
that's
make
what we
sense.
do, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know,
I
but
was
I
just
know
thinking
exactly which
Bigfoot doesn't
video
know
you're
our name,
talking
like
about.
Brian Bowden, Bigfoot knowing his name. I love that opening song.
Oh, his unicorn song.
Yes,
That's a great one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Brian created a new song for our appearance on his show coming up.
Oh, crap.
And
That
he
should be
already
fun.
knows. He keeps on saying he's a dead man in chat. So so we'll see what kind words Michelle has for him when we show up there on Wednesday. By the way, everybody, we are going to be on Brian's show on Wednesday, just so you guys know. I'll link all
Love you,
that stuff.
Brian.
The man with 30,000 podcasts.
And Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Listen, let me
Yep.
tell you, he has an almost unrivaled collection of Hawaiian shirts, I have to say, and they're all really nice. But yeah, well, thank you guys for having us. Really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun, and I'm glad the weather held out to be able to do this. So that's very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is pretty sketchy out here right now, and the sky keeps changing colors on us, and lightning and thunder. It's typical Michigan, possible tornado or straight winds or something. So spring in Michigan is always
Yep.
a roll of
Welcome
the
to
dice.
spring, right?
I know north of here, friends of ours that normally watch the show may not be. They had a horrible ice storm hit about mid part of the state all the way up.
Toward the UP.
Petoskey, Alpena, Gaylord, Michigan, all of it. They've been showing all kinds of videos.
The trees are all bent over, covered in ice, just encased in ice, and
It looks
bad.
like a war zone.
yeah.
It's horrible to hear that. That's
Yeah.
not great. But luckily, we're starting to warm up a little bit. I hope you guys are starting to thaw out a little bit up there too. So
Yeah, we hit almost 70 today, even though it was
Oh,
rainy
wow.
and stuff. So
Yeah, we're southern Michigan, so we've just got to worry about the tornadoes and the straight winds coming through.
yeah.
So this time of year, usually ice storms don't hit.
Yep.
that's a good
Well,
thing.
Let's jump
Yeah.
into this a little bit. And one of the first things I got on my notes here, and let's see where this goes, is your origins and inspirations for you guys to get together and form the Brothers of the Arcana podcast. And how did your backgrounds influence the creation of this? Yeah, I
It
mean,
didn't. It's all Dave's fault.
It's only partially my fault. At least the name's my fault, but
Yeah, the name's 100% his fault. The fact that we have to explain it to everyone is 100% on Dave. But he and I were masters in our respective lodges. We're both Freemasons. And being master of your lodge is like being president of that particular clubhouse, so to speak. And I was the one in Bernardsville, New Jersey. He was the one in Chester, New Jersey. And we were working together in the same Masonic district. So, we'd share problems and issues as leaders. And, what are you seeing in your lodge? What am I seeing in my lodge? How do we make things better for the members? How do we, put more butts in seats, get guys to have a good time, learn things, all kinds of stuff that you do as Masons. And then we started just smoking cigars together. We got to be really good friends. He's one of my best friends. And we were hanging out for, I guess, over a year and a half easy, just talking about this kind of stuff and smoking cigars. And all of a sudden we're like, you know what? We're doing this anyway. Might as well just do a podcast about it, because it's not like we're going to stop talking about it. So,
right.
And we throw in a Masonic flair to all this. So there's a fair amount of like esotericism and metaphysics and other stuff. And Dave has, and I'm sure he'll tell you, a rich history of paranormal investigations and, meeting and punching ghosts in the baby maker and that like he always talks about doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the interesting thing. Like Alex and I were just sitting there we talk a lot of philosophies, esoteric topics, really deep contemplative kind of thought. And, as we were sitting there, it was probably like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, smoking cigars. We're just like, we
Pretty
should have
much.
recorded this conversation because that was some amazing points we just brought up. And that's how this all came to be. And then we threw out some names, and Alex still curses at me for that. But, all good.
Now, are you guys like strictly within the Mason like fraternity, I guess you would call it, or are you part of multiple? And what got you guys started in the whole getting into the Masons or being invited or however that works?
Well, Dave, you want to? All
I
right,
could go first if you
all right, go
want. So I have an interesting backstory to how I got into Masonry, but we are part of other appendant bodies in Freemasonry. Scottish Rite, York Rite. Alex is a part of, I think, the whole collection of them, it seems like. But with that being said, I don't have that
like
much
them
free
all.
time. But a couple years back, I was actually, it's a really random and weird story, but I was going through a divorce. I talked to one of my friends who's a medium, and she's just like, how come you've never looked into Freemasonry and that sort of thing? And that night I went out to dinner with one of my best friends at the time, and his father-in-law was actually the former master of the Chester Masonic Lodge. So we were sitting there, and I don't even know how it came up at dinner. I just said, like, hey, I went to this medium today and I was talking to her and she mentioned Freemasonry. He's like, oh, what do you know about that? It's like, nothing. And ultimately, we ended up just chatting. He invited me to come out to the lodge. I went there. It just felt like I was at home and ended up joining. So that was the way it went.
Alex, how about you?
So for me, it was a little different. I met my mentor in Masonry in court, believe it or not. So being a lawyer, we were doing. I was in tax court and saw a guy walking around with a little square and compass on his lapel, and I said, "Are you a Mason? What's the deal with that?" And I had just returned to New Jersey from DC, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was really cool. And I had thought about joining Masonry in DC, but then I had moved back for a whole host of reasons, and it just never had worked out. And then all of a sudden, boom, here I am in court and seeing this again. So I'm like, just too many synchronicities in and around this. So I went and again had dinner with the guys. Really liked everybody in the lodge. That was Essex Lodge in Caldwell, New Jersey. And then years later, I joined another lodge down in Bernardsville, New Jersey, Congdon Overlook, where I was master of both of them at various times. And that's a tough thing. Aside from, for a second, the esoteric piece, just the organizational piece, right? So you're master of a thing, you're like president of a thing. So then it's a bunch of guys because it's a fraternity, right? So it's guys, and then it's like, how do you become or learn to become a leader of men when you can't when you can't manipulate them with money, in essence, where you can't you can't bribe them to get there by either threatening to fire them or agreeing to pay them more. So there's other ways of dealing with, how do you motivate guys to want to do interesting projects and things and want to, work towards the betterment of all of the members and do that kind of thing. So it's leading a nonprofit organization is really what it is at the end of the day. And part of that is fundraising. Part of that is charity work. It's a lot. It's a lot of different kinds of things that sort of crop up. And obviously Masonry gets a little bit of a bad rap online, partly because of the secrets and stuff. And, now they're trying to be a kindler, gentler fraternity. So they're saying it's not a secret society. It's a society with secrets. So there's a couple of things we can't say, like what happens during the rituals and how one Mason recognizes another. You can't talk about that kind of stuff, but you can pretty much talk about everything else, and they're opening up lodges to the public and they're renting them out as spaces for people to do all kinds of things with them and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But, would be back in our grandfather's day, he could have been a Mason his whole life and he never would have told you, even if you were his grandkid or whatever. You had to ask him 3 times to be a
Yeah.
Mason without him prompting you in order for him to then say, oh man, I'm glad you asked me. And he couldn't tell you that it had to be 3 times before he was allowed to then talk about it with you. So, like a lot of things have changed in and around that.
That asked one to be one is no longer there. At least in New Jersey.
At least in New Jersey. And which I'm all for, because there's a lot of great guys that I think would benefit from this system. And what was the second part of your question before I blab on?
Just like your background influences and I want to dig into this, the esoteric, and what you guys mean by that. And since you brought it up, the secrets and everything, what's so secretive? What I mean, there's people out there talking about sacred geometry all the time, Randall Carlson, and doing online drawings and showing you and teaching you about all of this stuff. So it's like, what is so secretive? And I know that's giving away the secret, but it's like the worst kept secret is saying you have a secret.
Well, look,
because everybody's going to be on you.
You go online and almost everything is that is a Masonic thing is online. But here's the biggest secret in Masonry is really the gestalt that happens in the lodge during the rituals. And there's nothing that, I mean, you could buy Duncan's ritual right now if you go on Amazon, and you could read what at one point was the ritual in, who knows, some lodge somewhere. But the truth is, I think I did add a chapter to the bio, Brian. Yes, I don't know where that came from. I think Dave did it, or we ran it through ChatGPT to try to get it better. But the there's something that happens during the ritual that even if I wanted to tell you, I couldn't, because you have to be present for it. There's a magic that happens in that moment, and it creates what we call the mystic tie. It's what all Masons sort of share together. It's if I met you and you're a Mason, and I've never met you in my life, I automatically have a certain modicum of trust with you. I have a certain modicum of respect and a feeling of warmth towards you as a brother, right? So that automatically applies to pretty much all Masons anywhere in the world, and it's irrespective of creed, color, religion, background, language, anything like that. So that's one of the things I like best about it, is that it's so open and available in that way. But outside of that, so what is esoteric? Esoteric is the opposite of exoteric. So exoteric means outside teachings, right? So, but esotericism exists almost everywhere you look. So certainly in any sort of church or temple experience, any sort of
I would say, like, you'd say spirituality, like any occult teachings, alchemy, the Kabbalah, Hermeticism. There's also
correct
philosophy and religion, like you're saying, Gnosticism or Buddhism. There's all these hidden teachings.
Martial arts obviously have both an exoteric and an esoteric background. Any sort of meditation aspects and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would say.
And like Alex alluded to before, the metaphysical aspect, that's really where sacred geometry and energy work comes into play.
Yeah, in fact, on our podcast, we have a new playlist that we put up about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, called the educational playlist. And on it, we have a couple of different presentations. I have one there on quantum entanglement, vibration, and Freemasonry. And I have one on sacred geometry, church design, and Masonry. Just go to playlists there. There you go. And there should be that educational,
the educational series, the first one there.
Okay.
And so basically, and then Dave has one on paranormal.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing I've yet to record it, but we're going to be doing the paranormal. Yeah. We're going to be doing UFOs and probably cryptids as well. Just doing presentations on that for an educational series.
Cool.
Yeah. So we're trying to get, as Mason's called, you're searching for more light And it's light just means you're searching for more wisdom, inner wisdom, outer wisdom, all of that kind of stuff. And that's one of the things services we're trying to provide.
I said
You know,
alchemy, Brian.
yes, yes. Did he mean least or lest? Anyway, so man, you made me lose my train of thought, Sir Brian. Nice work. Good job. No, I'm joking.
That's those sneaky little Knights Templar people.
Yeah,
See, that's why you
but
catch hell on the internet right there.
that's also where we came up with the Brothers of the Arcana, because you know,
Okay.
Arcana is really derivation from the Latin, where you know it's talking about secrets or mystery, and you know, with this esoteric traditions, this secret knowledge we've been seeking, and the initiatic orders we're part of, and esoteric schools we study and such, you know, it all kinds of ties together. So that's why that name came together, to the dismay of Alex.
Okay. Yes. Is it, Dave? Is that what it is? Okay, fair enough. No, because I always messed with him, and I said, why couldn't we just be Brothers of the Arcane? Now we got to be Brothers of the Arcana, so we have to explain to everyone what Arcana means. But I guess it gets you talking about these things. But the fun part is esotericism is an inner teaching. It's a deep wisdom that is oftentimes hard fought, well defended, and something where only the trusted are allowed to possess for obvious reasons. There's a lot of stuff out there that's dangerous. There's a lot of stuff out there that, if used for the wrong reasons or for selfish reasons, could cause damage, could cause tragedy of many different kinds. So if you possess power, you must know how to have the capacity to use that power properly. And that's been the fear of every master of every age, trying to make sure that, you know, that's why the Sith only had a master and an apprentice, because they couldn't trust any more than that. And even there, they'd kill each other. So, you know, I mean, it's the reality is that this is knowledge that has to be properly taken care of and properly disseminated, and can't just be done willy-nilly. That's kind of the in and out of esotericism, I'd say.
So I noticed that you guys talk about like ancient civilizations. You've had many conversations on this, like extraterrestrial theories. You were just hitting on that a little bit, metaphysical concepts, all that good stuff. So is it your Masonry background that kind of made you want to look into these things, or was this something you would have done even if you weren't Masons?
I think I was doing this long before I was a Mason. I think Freemasonry just gave me a different layer to that puzzle, unraveling the onion. And, you know, as we talked about on our last podcast, you know, it's kind of the front porch of esoteric orders and such. So,
right,
you know, as we continue to seek knowledge and dig deeper into the mysteries of life and the universe, it's certainly just something we came across, and I think has, at least for me, has benefited greatly.
Yeah, for me it was I grew up in communism in Romania as a young child, and then came over here. So I really didn't have, I was baptized as a child, as they do in the Orthodox tradition for the most part. But outside of that, you really don't get much in the way of religion and education of that kind. That was very frowned upon at that time. And so when it came to America, I had a sort of hunger on my own, and I sort of discovered a lot of this stuff on my own. Also was interested in the occult. There's a really great used bookstore in Montclair, New Jersey, that had like so many different crazy occult books and other things like that. And I was always just fascinated with that kind of thing. But Masonry allows you an opportunity to meet a lot of guys who are fascinated by these things. They, like, look, most of Masonry is not that way. Let me just put that out there. It's not like everyone in Masonry is super esoteric and runs around with, you know, grimoires or you know, drawing magic circles or doing any stuff like that. It's not at all the case. Like 90%, maybe 85 or 80% of Masonry is a lot of guys who like the fraternal aspect, which is like bourbon and cigars, hanging out, having a good time, the fellowship aspect. It's a lot like, if you're in the military or that kind of thing, you're looking for that sort of buddy outside of the armed forces, and Masonry is a really good place to have that sort of bond. But then it does go to some esotericism if you want it to. It can go into those areas. And then the really esoteric stuff is actually not Masonic. Masonry sort of opens the way there. It's like the gateway drug. And then it gets you into like all these other things. And before you know it, there's Golden Dawn, there's Rosicrucianism, Martinism, there's a million different isms that are out there that can all be explored. There's right-hand path stuff, there's left-hand path stuff. Am I advocating the left-hand path stuff? No, I'm not. But, it's there and people do it. So, we had a great talk with a couple of guys on the podcast, including Chuck Dunning, who's a pretty famous Masonic author who happens to be a good friend of ours. And I asked him point blank, I said, Chuck, do you think it's possible to have an enlightenment experience while walking a left-hand path system? And he said yes. And so that's, yeah. Yeah, Brian,
Yeah.
It is a gateway drug, all right? Deal with it.
And even
Brian says gateway drug, all in caps.
Oh,
my
boy.
Lord.
Oh, my Lord, Sir Brian. Yeah, we also had a great discussion with Mark Stavish where we were talking about a lot of the traditions, and he really hits on a lot of that occult and mysticism and those esoteric traditions you can get into.
Very much so. And that's I really wish that particular episode had gotten more play, and I hope it does in the future, because we cover so many amazing things in that particular interview. Like, we take Mark. So Mark is director for the Hermetic Institute in Pennsylvania, or I think it's a Institute of Hermetic Studies. And we took him through every one of those isms, or all the ones we could think of. And I said, Mark, what's this one about? What do you think of it? Is it wealth? Can it really lead to an enlightenment experience, or is it just a waste of people's time? Because I think that's one of the things that's so important, is there's so much stuff out there, more than a lifetime of stuff can be dedicated to it. And if you're really a seeker, if you really want to search for your own enlightenment, well, we want to help you with that, right? So let's not BS people. Let's not waste people's time. Let's try to get into a thing where we can actually point you and say, hey guys, here's an expert. Here's a possibility for you to learn more, if that's what you want. If it's not great, and seek your own thing. But that's kind of what we're here. We're here to stir up debate. We're here to sort of point north for people and say, and of course I was being tongue in cheek when I said Masonry is a gateway drug, but what it is, it's really a gateway experience towards those deeper mysteries, if you're open to them. So again, the choice is ultimately the individuals.
Well, speaking of deeper mysteries, with everything that was going on the Jersey Shore with the drones, what were the conversations like between the two of you regarding that? Because we had a conversation with a friend of ours out of Patterson, New Jersey, and she talked about kind of like the vibration in the air, and
like things had changed.
Yes,
like it was palpable of what she could feel. She's also psychic, and she's very good at what she does, and it was very noticeable to her. And so we're curious as to, like, Dave, you being a researcher and things like that, did you go out researching? What did you find? What was going on out there? And is it still going on?
It's still going on to a certain degree. It's the funny thing is, on Ring, like, for a while, like every night, it was like there must have been about 10,000 posts. It's just like, oh my God, there's drones overhead. Oh, did you guys see that? And it's like half the time people were posting pictures of airplanes flying into Newark Airport. It was just like, that's a 737, guys. But with that being said,
thank you for your concern, Kelly. I am not actually on fire.
We keep a fire extinguisher next to him. Don't worry. But
Yes. I'm only on fire metaphorically.
so okay,
It's incense.
In terms of the New Jersey drones, I think initially when you look at when these drones first popped up, they came up right after the election. So our current president typically flies into Morristown Airport when he's going to Bedminster, which is where his golf course is located. There's another location further south as well, but he typically is in Bedminster. So what was interesting is the drones popped up immediately following his election. And then on top of this, they were scanning. These drones were hovering overhead. Some nights you could actually see them. They were just stationary. A lot of times they were moving, but you could just tell they were flying on corridors where their other planes were. What I theorized at the time, and I went out and I tried to take some videos. I mean, granted, some of them are very unclear, whatever else, but I was watching them constantly because I live right by Morristown Airport, which is where he flies into. As the bird flies, I'm probably about a mile or less from there, actually. But with that being said, my understanding was that I'm not sure if you're familiar, but off of Sandy Hook, there's Naval Weapons Station Earl.
Yep.
So what they do is they have cargo ships that come into port there.
Mm-hmm.
They'll transport nuclear waste and other waste that they take off of submarines and the ships. They get transported down to Fort Dix or McGuire. And, there's actually tunnels for the trains that go underground. Supposedly one of the containers containing some nuclear waste went missing. My understanding is that there was the case that they put this in. It's like a really cool looking case, and it's about $115,000 in value. So they weren't sure if somebody just stole it or if it was actually nefarious and they were trying to use it for a dirty bomb. So what was interesting was they were scanning the area. So what my understanding was they were doing this at night. They were scanning overhead and they were trying to see what the ambient temperature was and also the conditions, see if there's any radiation or anything else that was popping up. And they were triangulating that with satellite information as well. They were just trying to get a baseline to see what's going on. There was actually, I don't think it really made the news, but there was a truck that got stopped on Route 15 going north. They had a bunch of smoke detectors in it going to a Home Depot or a Lowe's. But, it picked up and there was like 30 feds, like in the state police, like surrounded this guy at gunpoint and everything. Like he was shitting bricks. And, unfortunately fortunately, I should say, it was just, smoke detectors. But to your point, I think it changed the energy in the area. People were really afraid, scared. And I'm not going to say some of the sightings that I saw, there were definitely things that I felt like, I don't think that's a drone.
Well, talk about the orbs because that's important, I think, at this
yeah,
point.
So one thing that's noticeable was the drones were flying super slowly. You could see they had aviation lights on them. And, like people were saying, oh, maybe it's UFOs or whatever. It's like, why are UFOs flying with aviation lights? I mean, come on.
Right.
I'm not saying they couldn't be if they were trying to,
mimic
say they're just
or whatever.
They're trying to mimic our aircraft or something, but it's just like, yeah, I'm not buying it.
Can I show you guys something real quick
Sure.
that I just had come in last night about midnight?
Absolutely.
Check this out. They look kind of like that.
No, I mean, honestly, the drones, like they had a very, like, it was a red light mostly on the back. It was aviation lights, but it was a slower strobe. It was like really slow compared to a plane. So
this lady that sent this to me, she recorded a black triangle that did not come out. It just barely comes out on the video. And then it's just gone. I did everything I could to try to enhance the image, and I'll show it to you here in a minute. But her and her brother saw it, and they're swearing like sailors over here. So I didn't want to play the audio because, but she swears up and down that this is a drone. They see them all the time flying over their house. And then can you see the light right there?
Yeah, I see the light in the background there.
Okay.
Yep.
While these things are flying around,
Mhm.
see the other lights?
Yep.
She says those are orbs zipping all over the place.
Well,
And
I was going
they
to say,
flash.
and that's
So
what
when you
Alex was
said
alluding
that,
to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's one.
And yeah, so there was definitely, that's the thing. I actually did see orbs at times as well. And the orbs I couldn't explain. To me, I would actually, there was a couple times I drove out to try to get closer to some of those just to see like if I could get close enough to actually recognize what it was. Some of the
Right.
drones, there was one night I was actually driving on over Watchung area, like I was on a hilltop. So I was high enough that there was a drone flying by and I could actually see pretty up close the drone itself. But the orbs I can't explain. I actually feel like those might have been maybe some interdimensional being. It could have been a UFO, whatever you want to call it. But
Well,
to me, I feel like.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I actually think that there's some credence to the fact that they've, could it be some kind of experimental government craft that we don't know about? Sure. I mean, there's also.
There's something to be said about the dimensional effect of all this stuff. So one of the things that Mattson talks about is that these things are fifth dimensional beings or higher dimensional beings that sort of interact with yeah, Brian, you're very right. The TR3B, we just talked about that a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
The Black Manta is definitely a part of this discussion, no question. But the idea that, when you have a two-dimensional flat piece of paper and a three-dimensional object it deals with it, Eric said, what would it look like to a two-dimensional person if you're seeing a three-dimensional? Well, you'd see the end of a finger coming in and going out, right? So that's all you'd be able to see because you're only two-dimensional. You can't see the other aspects or the other parts of it. So that orb may not be what the thing is. It's just, it may be what we can see it, right? So it's like what we're capable of interacting with on our level. So we're three-dimensional beings functioning in a four-dimensional world. I mean, if you count time as its own dimension. So, that's kind of what we're talking about.
But I think from the orb perspective, I mean, there's definitely been sightings where these are popping into the ocean, popping out, they become submersibles. They're moving at excessive speeds that no craft that we know of could move at, right? And even Eric, when he came back on the podcast for a second episode, he alluded to the fact that there were some studies that they said they're actually using the water as a lubricant, and they're able to, for whatever reason, I guess traveling interdimensionally or whatever they're doing, the water is actually a means for them to do that. I don't know how, I don't know why. Well, I'd love to find out, and we're definitely digging further into that, but it's certainly interesting. And a lot of those orb images they were showing off the coast of New Jersey too. Where off the beaches, people were saying they saw orbs coming out of the ocean. So from that perspective, yes, it's definitely possible that they're extraterrestrial in nature. And going back to the TR3B, our understanding is that there's some kind of military base out in Pennsylvania where that actually originates out of. So the Black Manta or the TR3B, it flies out of there. You could actually look up the patents online for the craft. It's supposed to be, some kind of gravitational. It
wasn't damn Margera.
Yeah, it was anti-gravitational. It's like, levitation, whatever else. Which there's some speculation that Eric had that maybe that came from the Bell Project, with the Nazis or things of that nature.
Well, so speaking of those orbs, let me jump back to this real quick because she sent me this last night as well, and then I'm gonna show you the picture that she was able to get out of her video. That it's only a split second, and I did everything I could last night to enhance it, and it's only there for like a half of a second, and it just disappears. But if you watch in this part right here, right in the middle here, she films she says it happens all the time, and then the big flying flashing light drones will fly by, and these things, you'll see them like you're talking about, blipping in and out, in and out. Boom.
Oh, I see it.
Boom, 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 boom. And it looks like, see them all right there? It could look like it's one craft maybe, zipping around. Let me go through this really slow. And it's going so fast, it's just appearing, disappearing, appearing, disappearing. See right there?
Yeah.
It's gone. And then now it's here. And now it's here.
Well, is this time lapse or is this all done? I mean, it seems like
this is here. I'll just play it full speed.
So.
It's her camera on her phone picking up the surrounding lights.
Gotcha.
See how it's like they're zipping around. She says she'll see them every night. She can make a video like this every night.
Wow.
And she was asking me what kind of camera can she get that would help her be able to see these. So there's that. And then let me share with you guys.
Yeah, see, what I always like to do, I pull up a radar, so I typically like to look at the ADSB, which is the automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, I think, from planes. And then there's also, like the live radars you could kind of pull up, because what I try to do is at least try to debunk things and say, okay, I'm seeing these flashing lights in this direction. Is that just a plane? Is it high level? Is it low level? Whatever else. And sometimes there's nothing in the area. I mean, granted, our airspace here in New Jersey is one of the most congested in the world. So,
yeah,
that's also true.
Yeah. And she was doing that as well. She said the drones don't show up and the orbs don't show up.
The drones and the orbs definitely don't show up. And
yeah. Well, they need to have transponders on them, and they need to be picked up by radar and that signal return. But this is what her and her brother saw for literally on the camera. You can see it for a second during the video, but the video goes for about 20 seconds, and they're yelling, "What the F is that? What is that? Where is it going?" And now it's gone, and they're like, "What is that? What is that?" And it was at 9:30 at night. There were no birds, nothing flying, absolutely quiet, no sound. And it was one of these, looks like an equilateral triangle, just dead silent. And she wanted me to enhance it and stuff, and I couldn't get it any better than she could. I'm not a video picture guy that can do all that stuff. But so that was, just talking about that, things that just came in last night to us about what's going on. And she's on the East Coast over here, so Lake Erie area. So fun UFO stuff.
Makes sense, man. All that stuff's more Dave's province than mine. I'd like to learn more about it. It's not my bailiwick. I'm more of on the metaphysics and occult stuff. But yeah, that's I do find it pretty fascinating all in all.
Alex tries to avoid the things that go bump in the night sometimes, I guess, but but although the funniest thing is there's a mansion right up the road from his lodge, and it's not far from here. It's called Glen Alpin, and he loves going over there, even though the place is literally it's like surrounded by demonic beings, and it has such a crazy negative energy when you're out on the road.
I would buy it if I could.
I don't know why he's so drawn to this place. I think they're
it's
trying
pretty
to lure
awesome.
him in.
It was actually made for like an Austrian
place.
It was actually meant for like an Austrian princess. Like if you look at, you remember the house on the game board of Clue? Like it would have, you remember Clue when we were like little and we used to play that game?
Yep.
Yeah, so they had like the
Of
conservatory, which was like where they had all the plants, and it was made out of glass, and like that whole room. It has that. It has like all of this crazy. It's like a 16-room mansion. It's absolutely beautiful. It's meant to look like an alpine lodge in like the Tyrolean hills of Austria. and it was built for an Austrian princess, and she moved here, and she ended up dying in the house. And apparently, it's built on top of probably a slaughter ground of Native Americans that were like, there's tons of cemeteries all around that area.
What about burial mounds?
Well,
burial
yeah,
mounds?
and then later on, probably too. In fact, Dave was saying there's certain areas that got sunken or like ponds or lakes.
Well,
Small
yeah,
lakes.
because right across from that, so that's right on what is that, 206 and Tempewick Road.
202, yeah.
202, sorry, Tempewick Road. But right across from there, a lot of Harding Township, which is right outside of Morristown, used to be a lot of there's a ton of graves. It was mostly burial ground. Actually, where my uncle lives over there, they exhumed graves to build their houses over there. And there's there are bodies of water and some lakes over there, or whatever they are. It might just be drainage, but there's still graves underneath that apparently, and they never moved them. So there's definitely some burial mounds, and even like we sometimes talk about Evergreen Cemetery in Morristown, which is, that's
so that's a whole other story.
The whole Potter's Field, where
right,
they were saying, one of our friends who's a historian of the cemetery estimates there might be 100,000 bodies buried in
Carolina,
this Potter's Field.
This house is clear.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw the chat, but I tried to send in the private chat Glenn Alpin, just a picture of it there. But with that being said, Evergreen, this Potter's Field, they said a lot of times the who's who of the world back then, if they had a mistress or somebody, indentured servant or whatever, got knocked up, and they said they would commit them to Greystone, the mental hospital in the area, and they would have them essentially euthanized, just because they didn't want them to be a problem.
They were undesirables of the time.
Yeah.
Isn't that pretty awesome?
Is that the place? That is a pretty awesome place.
That is
the place. If you pull into the driveway there, it is very haunted.
Especially give them the whole output, because what ended up happening was I drove to it at night on my own, and I got to about a quarter of the way up the driveway from the street, and it's exactly what happened to you guys when you met the aliens on that road in 2018. I smacked up against the barrier of psychic force, and the thing said, "Get the hell out of here. You're not wanted here. Beat it." And it was not nice about it in any way. It said, "Get the fuck out." And so I'm like, "Well, you don't need to tell me twice." And so I backed up the car and got out of there. And then I talked this over with Dave, and Dave, in his usual, way of dealing with ghosts, he's like, "Let's go punch him in the dick. Let's go. Come on." So, we drove the next day. But what did you dream about the night before?
Yeah, so the interesting thing, the night before, and I had no idea we were going to this place or whatever else, but I had a dream that I saw this tall grass, like fescue or whatever you want to call it, that's surrounding kind of this driveway. And I just saw driving into this road with the headlights shining on the tall grass and kind of looping around. And Alex, I was driving home with him from Congdon that night, and he's just like, "Oh, why don't we stop over at Glen Alpin?" I'm like, "What? Oh, okay, fine, whatever." As soon as he pulls in the driveway, I all of a sudden, I love punching ghosts in the dick. Why not? But, so as soon as we pull in the driveway,
it's like a
frozen not condone that behavior here at Michigan UFO Sightings, a Paranormal Encounters podcast. God. Do not punch ghosts in the penis area.
Well, I tend to do that, but I guess you can go for a throat punch. Why not? But anyways, so we pull in, like, as I see Alex's headlights and the tall fescue in the grass, it dawned on me immediately. It's like, I saw this last night in my dream, or whatever it was. I don't know if it was a dream or just astral projection or whatever. But, and then Alex is just like, "Oh my God, this energy's so heavy." I'm just like, "Just pull around." I was like, "Screw him. You're fine." So we ended up looping around the driveway, and I could actually see all throughout these demonic and shadow figures just all around this drive. And that's where that negative energy and just that incredible force of like, you're not welcome here, leave, is coming from. So I explained that to Alex, and he's just like, how is this not bothering you? I'm like, whatever. I just said, punch him in the dick, just keep driving.
Well, Michelle,
Well, it says that what is it? The historical society or the township is looking for ways to use that property.
Yeah, I think they're trying to convert it into a restaurant or something, which is just like, oh god,
wow.
Good luck with that, guys. Yeah, there was
Bed and breakfast.
what was cool years ago in Morristown, there was a place called Jimmy's Haunt, and they've since knocked it down, which is an absolute shame, honestly, because the place was pretty cool. It was actually the home of the Sayer family. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with any New Jersey lore, but the Sayer family lived there, and Antoine LeBlanc came here. He was a French immigrant, and he brutally murdered the Sayer family. Samuel, their indentured servant Phoebe. It was what, 1833, I think it was.
Yeah, around there, something like that.
But I think I want to say it was September 14th, 1833. I think the murders happened. But what was interesting was he murdered Samuel and Sarah Sayer, and then their indentured servant Phoebe. And after that, he went on the run, but he stole their valuables, and he actually was leaking out of his satchel or whatever, like silver. I think that he dropped spoons or whatever else. So the sheriffs were able to track him down pretty quickly. They were over in Mendham, I think it was. He was at a tavern. They ended up catching him. They executed him. It was actually the last public hanging in Morristown. It happened on the Green. I think it was September 26th in 1833. And the aftermath was kind of, yeah, it is. Not in 1833, though.
No.
But what was interesting, they actually took his body. They ran all kinds of weird medical experiments and everything else in there. They skinned him, and they made it into souvenirs. So they made lampshades, they made book covers, wallets. Some of them are actually still on display at the Morris Museum and the courthouse in Morristown. So it's kind of grotesque, but from that perspective, this place, Jimmy's Haunt, was where they were actually murdered. So they called it Jimmy's Haunt because the dumbwaiter in there would constantly just, kind of do its own thing. They said the lights would turn off, they'd turn on. Like, people were always freaked out and spooked at the place. And the interesting thing is the owner actually opened up a new bar. Well, it's not so new now, but it's called, there's Iron Bar and Revolution, but he did a mural in the stairwell, and it looks like the devil. And I asked him about it one time, and I was just like, why'd you put that in the stairwell? He said, oh, that's what I used to see at Jimmy's all the time. So he was paying homage to Jimmy's at his new place, but it's just like, dude, it's like, that looks like Satan. So, it's like, that's what you're seeing? Like, all right, well, got it.
Yeah. Well, but what is the purpose of turning a killer into lampshades and wallet? And
I think they were just trying to make an example out of him, and the sheriff at the time signed them personally. So he actually put his autograph on it as if it was like some trophy that he caught this guy. And the interesting thing is, there's called the Devil's Tree in Bernard's Township that they claim Antoine LeBlanc is tied to or whatever else. I don't see how, but there's this tree, and now they actually surrounded it with fencing because people were going there and vandalizing the thing and everything else. But yeah, that's
can
right.
You imagine? Brian. Hey, folks! Not only do you get to see this guy die, but you can take a piece home with him too.
Well,
exactly,
Michelle. I think you're right on point there. I think they were made to be keepsakes. Like they didn't think anything wrong with like take some souvenirs with you from your grisly execution. Why not?
Wow. I mean, was that a practice back in the day, or they just
It probably was. It probably was. I'm guessing.
I don't know of any other times that's happened though. I think because Samuel Sayer if I remember correctly, and I could be getting this wrong, I think he was a judge or some kind of, he was an important figure in Morristown at the time. So I
Didn't
think the whole
Dorothy
thing,
tell us something about, isn't he buried on Piety Hill up there?
I don't know if Samuel was or not. He might have been. Trying to remember. Yeah, Evergreen Cemetery has a really rich history. It's kind of the who's who of New Jersey buried there, and there's some
Malcolm
crazy...
Forbes is buried there. There's a lot of like
Alexander Graham Bell's brothers buried there, and other Freelandheisen, the first governor of New Jersey, and people like that. Like, it's definitely the who's who of the world in a sense, and there's people buried there from every war in American history from Revolution on. So definitely a cool spot.
Well, I want to pivot a little bit on the conversation. And since we were talking before the show, Dave, about ancient civilizations and all that good stuff, and you guys being in New Jersey over there, have you guys been up to America's Stonehenge?
America's Stonehenge.
Yeah, it was featured on what's my guy's name? Scott Walter, on one of his shows. And it shows the alignments of the standing stones that they have there. It's called
Are you talking about Newport Tower? Or
no,
near there?
Or,
I
thought isn't that the one? Didn't Graham Hancock talk about that one? Isn't it out in Ohio somewhere?
No, that's the Serpent Mounds.
That's Serpent Mounds.
No, America's Stonehenge is in Connecticut,
New Hampshire, I think. Or
New Hampshire,
is it Connecticut?
New Hampshire. Yeah, and I think it's called Mystery Hill normally, but Scott Walter went out there. It's run by Dennis Stone and his family. And they call it America's Stonehenge because there's all of these standing stones and things on this hill. And when you plot them into a map, they align not only to like the solstices and stuff, but it'll go right through the Sarsen stones at actual Stonehenge in UK. And it's like connecting all of these different ancient areas in Central America, South America. You just plot a bearing from these stones and it'll take you right there. I think, Michelle, are you pulling it up right now? Just so I can get a picture.
Yeah, the funny thing is I've been to New Hampshire plenty of times, never visited there. I'll have to add it to my list.
I have. You know what? Maybe we'll take a trip up that way and see about doing that.
Salem, New Hampshire. Salem, New Hampshire.
Salem.
Yeah. Yep.
I want to go to Salem, Massachusetts on Halloween one of these years. I think that'd be pretty fun.
Let me see. Let me show you guys, because we were talking a little bit about what's going on in Egypt with some of the Egyptian scans and stuff that have come back. And I was telling Dave I'd done a kind of a deep dive into the technology that they use, the synthetic aperture radar, and things like this. And was just kind of interested on what you guys, if you guys have dug into this at all, what your feelings are. And also, this is kind of off the topic, but I want to get it out there into the ether anyways. Did you guys, when you became Masons, and if you were exploring any of this stuff beforehand, like Dave, you said you were into paranormal, UFOs and stuff, ancient civilizations, esotericism. Alex, you're more into the mysticism, kind of meditation and elevating consciousness and things like that.
Right.
Then you become Masons. Did you see anything that matched up with what you were already previously looking into, like the whole sacred geometry and looking at ancient civilizations, how they were built, the dimensions and all of that stuff? Did anything ring true to you guys after, like, oh yeah, I already know this stuff, because wait a minute, why did the Masons know this?
Well, because the Masons built it. So, to a great extent, I mean, if you look at craft lodges back before the fraternity was open, so to speak, in 1717 is when the Grand Lodge was originally instituted. You have the entire course of the Middle Ages, the Renaissance. Who was building the cathedrals? Who was building the castles? Masons were. And that's what's called operative masonry. In other words, it's masonry that actually works in stone. We're what's called speculative masons. We take the ideas of the Masonic principles and you use them to sort of build your own temple inside yourself, so to speak. So it's like a very old self-help movement in a lot of respects. Yeah, it's fascinating. You do learn a ton about sacred geometry. You learn a ton about symbology, how to interpret things, how to understand certain things. And again, it's esoteric for a reason. They needed to be paid for their work. And they were paid very well. They needed to make sure that the quality of the work was maintained, because God forbid you're building a huge building and it falls on people's heads or something because there's substandard work being done by people that don't know any better but are trying to, sail out under the guise of being a Mason. And so that's one of the things that was, in fact, there's stories out there about people even dying to conceal certain secrets in Masonry and other things like that, because that's how important these secrets were. And it all goes back to building something physical, building something metaphorical, building something holy. And it's like you could build with stones, you can build with words, you could build with prayers, you can build with many things in terms of being able to do that kind of thing. So yeah, there's lots of crossovers. I would also tell you that because Masonry is the front porch of all this stuff, or the gateway to it, the really, how do you call it? The really esoteric stuff I didn't find in Masonry. Dave or Sir Brian might disagree with me, but
no, I don't disagree with you. I feel like I've had to do a lot of my own research and come to my own conclusions on a lot of that. I think a lot of that is not necessarily taught in lodge or anything else. And maybe if you had,
go into the isms out there to find the real, more magical, more energetic things that can happen. Nathan asked a good question there. What's the link to the Jolly Roger symbol?
Yeah, I was just going to pop that up.
And the answer to that is actually found through Templarism. They said that there was an offshoot of the Templars that were that became pirates. And the Jolly Roger symbol is the original Templar system of the crossed bones and the skull on top. There's some Masonic
Hogan talked about
that
a lot on our podcast, but he deduced that basically because the Templars, when Jacques de Lemay was burned at the stake or whatever happened there, and they had to go underground, they were actually moving treasure out of Europe and they started moving it over to the New World. That's the whole Curse of Oak Island. It's like they said that was actually a Templar vault. Same thing with the Newport Tower. That's the keystone, according to Scott Walter, and the hooked axe. If you look into that keystone supposedly points, I think it's northwest to like 17 degrees. He said if you follow that, there's actually a Templar vault as well that they have maps to get to. But circling back on your question, with the whole pyramid and this synthetic aperture radar tomology they did, I think it's pretty astounding. I mean, I think they said, what was it, 8 cylindrical wells that are basically 648 meters deep. There was, I think, 5 structures they found. There was, I think when you're looking at something, all right, so supposedly if they're claiming, the Egyptians, the slaves used copper tools and they're going to the quarries and all this stuff with sledges, and they had to build ramps to bring these stones in. I honestly think, my personal opinion, we talked about this with Eric. We talked about this with Tim. I think they were power plants for sure. I think the
Without
fact
doubt.
that these are 2,100 feet deep or more, like clearly this was built by something other than the Egyptians. The fact that there's no hieroglyphs inside the pyramids, there's really not much of a mention within any text they found from the Egyptians that they even built these things. And
They never
Yeah.
even found a body,
right, exactly.
but yet they call them sarcophagi. You know, the big
Yeah.
black boxes. Yeah.
Right. But it's, to me, I think, Tim alluded to it. He said the Egyptians just found this and they knew it was something that was important. They knew that it was ancient technology that should be saved. But if you look at the precision and everything, there's just no way. We couldn't even build that today.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think it was probably some kind of advanced civilization that was here on Earth prior to us or coexisted with us. Whether that was the Anunnaki or somebody else, who knows? We could debate that, right? But
Well,
I think
yeah,
I do
if those
think they've
scans are
suppressed
correct-
history, though. Mm-hmm.
If those
Well-
scans are correct, that's that's almost a kilometer down.
Right.
Just those 8. It's just, is the technology giving us, and the software that they designed, is it giving us accurate readings? Is the thing.
So
Agreed.
I'm just looking at this now, but if you see how sort of, I don't know if it's cables or whatever it is that's sort of wrapped around.
They say that it's a walkway that goes around these, and these are hollow, like giant pipes.
Interesting. So because but I don't know if that walkway is made out of, whether it's made out of metal or whether it's made out of stone and dug around.
Well, my understanding was the pyramid was built right on bedrock. So the thing is, how did they dig through the bedrock?
Exactly.
And I'm not saying, like, obviously you look at Cappadocia and some places right around the world, we do have these ancient structures that are underground, but the precision that this looks like, it's like, how'd they do that?
And so to core out something like that, that's not hand dug stuff. It seems it's much too precise. And those boxes, you're talking about the idea of the piezoelectricity from the quartz crystal in the pyramid. Then, the way that those things are wrapped reminds me of what Eric was talking about, where you could just take a stick and do copper piping around it, and it would basically, you could pull down energy or free energy out of the ionosphere with it. It'll make your plants grow better. It's like that sort of orgone type of energy that makes your plants grow better, and everything like that. So they almost look like oil drilling
They
platforms.
look like
exactly.
Yeah.
And
the other thing is,
I was a really good point where he said maybe they were made in the first Earth age. One thing I will say about that is that Tim Hogan, when he came to speak in Jersey, Tim's a buddy of ours. When he came to speak in Jersey, he was saying how Masonry may be what's left over from a sort of primordial religion that existed before the flood. And one thing I will say that I think Masonry is, outside of just being a clearinghouse of esoteric wisdom, is also it's almost like a compendium or a library of sorts of esotericism. A lot of people say if there's ever another flood or something, it would be Masonry would have one of the abilities to basically recreate civilization based on all of the stuff that was there, all the wisdom that's gathered and that kind of a thing. So, is that true or not? I don't know, but it's interesting to think about.
We can't even order pancake breakfast. I'm not sure how we're rebuilding the world, but that's okay.
Did Brian say that?
No, but I'm sure he would.
I'm sure he would too.
What are we talking about? Pancake breakfast? Oh, yes, Brian did say something. And I'm looking for it.
Well, the Egyptians weren't making pancake breakfast, that's for sure.
No.
All right.
No, and I think to that point, I honestly, I just think, clearly history from what we've been taught and what is actual reality is completely different, right? And
Yeah.
you know, the interesting thing is I was actually looking into this a little bit more because I was just like, was there a possibility of like I don't even know how to say it properly, like the Aeolian sand or, you know, like the Sahara Desert. I was sitting there trying to research how long would it actually take for sediment and erosion of over time through the desert for this to even build up to say, let's just say these things were, you know, only a couple of feet tall at one point and they just kept adding onto it as, you know, say the ground layer rose. Looked it up. They said it might take like 680,000 years or so because there's really not that much erosion in that area. And, you know, I saw something else where somebody was arguing that they actually said, you know, maybe the ocean was right there at one point and it's actually sand from the ocean as opposed to, you know, just the desert. Because you look in biblical times, you look at Mesopotamia and all these other places, they were supposed to be these lush landscapes, right? With all these gardens and everything else. The Nile River Valley too was supposed to be very fertile. So the question is, at what point did it become a desert? You know,
Yeah.
and was that the Younger Dryas that actually triggered that event where,
Or
you know,
was it something before?
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, but the interesting thing is like the fact that this is 648 meters or like 2,100 feet into the ground or more. I mean, that's just astounding. And then I think they were saying there was, what was the other, like those blocks underneath were like, I think they were saying they were 80-meter
Yeah, 80
cubes
meters
or whatever
square
it was.
cubes. Yeah, those. Yeah, and they
Right.
share this.
And I think it spans 2 kilometers total or
Yeah.
something along those lines. Like, that's just insane when you think about the gravity of how big that is.
Yeah, these are 80 meters by 80 meters. Yep. It is
Yeah.
what the software is interpreting those
Mhm.
scans that are from above,
Right.
those radar scans. So, you know, my thing is that, you know, we could find out about this pretty easily by getting in there drilling and doing some. We could do a little evasive stuff, but we wouldn't damage anything. You know, you could be
Right.
smart about it, right? You could have all the
Absolutely.
Egyptian, you know, guys around to sit there and, you know, make sure everything's okay and all that. And we could find this stuff out. I want to see if I have the picture here that, um, there's one. No, I don't have it on this one. Anyways, the thing is that let's say this radar data and stuff turns out to be a bunch of falseness. Okay, so it's over. It's no good. Do we really need something like this to know? Because I'm sure you guys have seen the precision in those vases that are made out of solid
Oh, yeah.
granite,
Right.
and the tubular saw cuts with the millimeter thin, you know, tube drills that are going down. On top of that, I mean, the precision of the Great Pyramid. I mean, the scoop marks and the obelisk that they're carving that's still stuck in the bedrock, that's still there, and they don't know. You know, they have their pounding stones. They say there's people pounding out these grooves in this rock, and nobody could do that with a pounding stone. They're perfect, like symmetrical,
Yeah.
almost like they were using some type of sonic or frequency or some type of, I don't know, energy that could just go right through and just scoop it like a spoon.
Well, and I think to that point, like clearly the precision is just astounding. Especially, I saw, I forgot who the individual was that did that whole special on those vases and everything, but they're just incredible. And
Probably
even
our
with,
friend Ben Van Kirkwick on Uncharted X, because he's friends with
okay,
Chris Dunn, and
sure.
Chris Dunn is a metrologist, so they
Mhm.
measure things to the hundredth of a, like a hundredth of an inch for aerospace, and they brought
Mhm.
those vases in and measured all of them, and the precision was ridiculous. There was no
Yeah,
way they were
it's
handmade.
insane. No, they definitely weren't handmade. And
Well,
then I think to the point of you're talking about acoustics or whatever else, I do think it had to be levitation or some kind of method using frequencies and vibration to move these, because they didn't have cranes. They weren't floating these 80-ton, 200-ton stones for hundreds of miles down a river or whatever else, over mountain ranges, or, it's just, and it's not even just like, all right, the pyramids are one thing, but there's other structures all around the world. So,
well, what about Edward Leedskalnin, Coral Castle, Florida, right? So the whole idea of he would,
Yes,
or
yep.
they talked about the fact that he could levitate or somehow work with and create and move all these stones on his own. And whenever somebody came around to try to observe him, he would just stop and he would just stand there until they left. And then they would, yeah. So, I mean, look at that, and even if they had finished that.
Well, and here's
how
the
do you
other thing to
transport it?
this. But here's the thing. It's one thing to transport it. How do you stand it up?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
and then
who's getting underneath that and just being like, oh, push. Okay, we got it.
Well, and you can see the scoop marks go all the way down.
You start to see how they would do it with Stonehenge, where they would actually dig a hole underneath it, fill it with water, and then they would basically tip it until it stood itself up. But I don't know if you could do that with something that big.
I mean, look at this. This is what gets me. They say, and there's a little pounding stone right there in the picture. Okay, that is hilarious. These scoop marks go underneath the unfinished obelisk and then change directions and then come back and up. It's almost like some kind of a backhoe type of
a backhoe or some kind of,
that could go through this limestone. And you can tell they're evenly spaced. It was the same tool. You're not going to get that with pounding stones.
It was just some dude with a bucket, right?
30,000
some dude with a diaper and a bucket. No, I don't think he was doing it.
Exactly. And they did it all in a couple of years. No big deal.
Right. And then, you look at this thing and you're like, okay. And you can see that probably while they were making it, there was an earthquake or something that fractured it. But you look at that, there's people standing on half of it. Okay, so how do you get that thing out of there? Float it? Was there water there? Could you flood it?
Right, that's the whole thing. It's like, how are you, and not only move it, but then lift it where it's upright.
Yeah, so I guess for me, I don't need any of this stuff underneath Khafre, the second pyramid, to be true. For me to think that the ancient Egyptians, I'm talking pre-dynastic Egyptians, the ones that were talked about in Zet Tepe, the first time, and all of these anamorphic or whatever they are, the Horus and these different gods that they called them, they were here. There was something else here, or some type of humanoid or something that had these technologies, or we were just more advanced. And then something happened that wiped them out. And then the next humans come across this stuff and become a cargo cult and go, hey, let's stick our dead bulls in these boxes. The Serapeum is what I'm talking about. Because if you look at the Serapeum, I'm going to pull up my map here. Are you guys familiar with the Serapeum?
No.
With the black boxes? Let me show you guys this. Let me share. Stop sharing that. And people listening on the podcast, jump over to our YouTube so you can see all of this stuff.
Yeah, the Serapeum is in Saqqara. Alex, Tim Hogan showed us that in a presentation.
Right here. This is a map, but look at how they are designed. It's almost like you want your these boxes offset so that they don't interfere. It's almost like some type of a polarity thing, like batteries.
Right. Yeah, and they're all at a 90-degree angle.
None of them are directly across from each other. And there's still more of them that are buried that they have to go through and still excavate. And then there's the one that's stuck. Well, I'm not going to say stuck, but it's just sitting in the hallway right there. And there's no way that they could have moved it down the entranceway and made
Yeah,
these
so-
right turns with it.
Tim talks about this
yeah.
these things being made out of dendrite. It's called dendrite, which is like this extremely a resilient granite that they found in the area. And like they said that you basically, it's incredibly hard to chisel this thing. You have to basically cut it with a laser or use acid in order to basically scoop it out, because regular cutting techniques will just destroy your chisel because it's just that hard. So
Right, and they claim that's why they found beeswax, because they thought that
they were
the
using acid
wouldn't.
in the beeswax.
They would use acid to make cuts, and then the beeswax wouldn't go through that. But the fact is, like, these sarcophaguses, or sarcophagi, as I guess they're called, you know, some of those are 80 tons.
Yeah,
the precision that they were cut is insane. The angles, I mean, they're perfect 90-degree angles. Like, there's actually, I know that one picture where they're showing, they're holding the framing square, and the thing's completely square. It's just like, yeah, okay. Clearly somebody did this with a chisel. And
100%.
But the other interesting thing, when you look at some of these, look at the hieroglyphs or the carvings in them, you could just see they're so shoddy compared to the precision of what was done. So to me, that was done well after the fact. You know, somebody just came along and it's like graffiti. They're writing on the thing. It's just like, hey, it's like, let me put my selfie on here or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, they were the ultimate taggers, right? They would find something. They figure if they put their cartouche on it, it was theirs. And that meant they built it. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. So,
and I think a lot of it has to do with they just want to take credit and say, yeah, our civilization was so much more advanced than the rest of the world, and we were able to do this when nobody else could. Just like,
exactly.
Yeah,
like, I don't think so.
Be right back.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like at some point, you know, maybe somebody will come along and just be like, yeah, we built those. Yeah, maybe the Anunnaki or somebody will come back to Earth and just be like, yeah, you guys didn't build this. It's like,
well,
here's how we did it.
There are those theories out there that talk about that is what the pyramids were for. If you talk about industry, that they were for developing these acids or some type of acid.
That could be the case. I feel like, you know, I think Eric talked about, you know, and even Tim Hogan talked about, like, in the King's Chamber, if you actually look at the sarcophagus in there, it would be the exact dimensions or pretty close to the dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant. So they theorized that was actually a power plant. The Ark of the Covenant might have actually been a portable generator or power plant, so to speak. And, you know, when you actually look at the way it was structured, you know, they talk about Aaron's rod and things of that nature. It's just like, yeah, you got to ground yourself before you could touch this. And, you know, I feel like a lot of the biblical stories you could tie into some of these things throughout history, and, you know, some of it might be allegory or whatever else, but you could kind of put two and two together, you know, in a lot of cases, which I think is pretty fascinating. So,
well, you know, people get caught up in the religious aspect, but you might want to look at it from a historical aspect, you know. And I've heard somebody say too, is people, you know, get caught up in, you know, well, why were they telling them that it was okay to have slaves and things like that? Well, you're not reading it within context. That's not necessarily what was going on. You had divine law and you had the law of the land and how people operated, you know, during those times. And I see Alex is back. But here's one of those boxes. But anyways, he always would say that you have to understand the difference between descriptive writing and prescriptive writing.
Sure.
And so if you look at that, and then the historical aspect of the Bible and the stories that are in there, and a lot of, not just the Bible, religious texts, pretty much anywhere. I mean, how many of them talk about there was a great flood at one point? You know, 150 different flood myths, I believe.
Or the death and rebirth myth, right? So that's been done in many, many cultures.
Yep.
I first actually heard about that weirdly during a survey course on religions in college when you heard about Inanna and the Iraqi and the Babylonian goddesses, and the Mesopotamian goddesses. But in my home country in Romania, they had the first monotheistic religion in Europe was the religion of Zalmoxis, which was the Dacian religion. And again, he went down into a cave and he spent, I forget what it was, 3 years or something like that down there. And he said, then he came back out and then he said, he did a whole bunch of stuff. And he said, I'm coming back at some point, and it's one of these sort of Messiah things. And so did Kukulkan, so did Quetzalcoatl. If you want to look at the Aztecs and the Mayans, there's so much of that. Osiris, same idea. So that's really, it does happen all over the world.
All right, and then you start looking into some of the places in Turkey, this huge underground.
Oh yeah,
like
Göbekli Tepe and all these places.
Well, yeah, Göbekli Tepe was above ground, and that's a whole other thing. With
it wasn't. I mean, it was buried.
Right.
Do we know if it was buried? How was it buried? All kinds of stuff like that. So
during Kuru or however you pronounce it,
you watch your
Turkey,
mouth.
It's like by Cappadocia. There's but to that point, there's so many. Like even the Aboriginals talk about a flood myth. The Mesopotamians, the Sumerians, the Akkadians, Babylonians, the Norse, the Greek, Native Americans. I think the Chinese. I think there's some African tribes that actually talked about floods. So clearly, is it really just a myth? It's like
right.
And I know Randall Carlson talks about there is evidence that there was a great flood. Göbekli Tepe, it seems like there might have actually been, what I always found interesting is the animals that are carved on the pillars. Was that actually the resting place of Noah's Ark? And did they sacrifice some of the animals? Not all of them, obviously. Otherwise, that would have been counterintuitive, as Alex put the other day.
Counterproductive to save all the animals. And,
right.
It's like sacrifice. Good barbecue that night, but no.
What
kidding.
I always found interesting about Göbekli Tepe was the carvings are relief carvings. They're not carved into the stone. The stone is carved around them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like that takes a lot of mental effort and physical effort to be able to do something like that. And those T pillars or whatever they call them, man, those are and they look like Easter Island. Like they have the same type of design work and everything like the Moai on Easter Island, because you dig down underneath those heads and there's bodies there, and they have the same
isn't that
kind of
weird?
belts.
Like why did they choose to bother carving those things just so they could bury them? It's so strange. Yeah. Unless they were trying to depict their gods, maybe the Anunnaki, maybe the all of these various things. So that's the kind of stuff that really fascinates me.
Yeah.
I think to that end, I mean, there's so many ancient megaliths all over the world. There's even here in the United States, right? Serpent Hill and such.
Yeah.
But why can't we really excavate these things and see what's truly going on and when it was actually built?
Yeah, and Michelle mentioned just a couple minutes ago the
giants.
Yeah.
Okay, talk more about that, Michelle. What are we talking about here? The Nephilim or the Irish giants?
No, the Nephilim.
Like the ancient ones, like way
as
back.
far as the theories of the construction of the pyramids.
Even the Mayans talk about that. The Mayans talk about they had giant people that built those. They say they didn't build them. They were there.
Well, and we look at those massive structures and, wonder as far as the construction and how they were moved. I mean, it's one theory.
Well,
certainly could be.
What gets me is that and I love Randall Carlson. He's a great dude and he's funny as hell and he's cool to hang out with and talk to. But
we'd love to get him on our podcast, by the way. Maybe you guys can help us with that. That'd be great.
Oh, good luck. It took us 3 years.
it took us 3 years. And I even talked to him at the very first Cosmic Summit and hung out with him and talked to him about coming on the show. And that's still how long it took. He's busy and he's writing his book and all of that stuff.
He's very busy. Yeah.
But people, and I love them for this. They're really focused on the ending of the last ice age, which isn't completely ended. Obviously, we're in interglacials and all that stuff still.
Sure.
But, they've brought a lot of attention to that, but they also hide the previous mass extinction event to humans that happened.
When you say previous, how much in the past?
70, somewhere between 73 and 76,000 years ago was the eruption of Mount Toba in Indonesia, which is a super volcano. And there was a human, and we know this from DNA and genetics. There was a genetic bottleneck of humans. We all come from about 5 to 10,000 surviving humans in Southern Africa. And so 76,000 years ago, this volcanic eruption was so bad and it set off other eruptions around the world that everything was wiped out. And you can look it up. They talk about it. And we basically come from anywhere from 5 to 10,000 humans that survived 76,000 years ago.
Now, who's talking about this?
Nobody. That's the problem. You can find it in all the encyclopedias and
I've read about that.
Yeah.
But then let me ask you, how do you know what happened?
Oh, there's all kinds of evidence for it. And there's our genetic line can be traced to 10,000 humans. Our diversity. We're not as diverse as we want to think we are because of our skin color. We're just different tones of brown. So it doesn't, but you look up Mount Toba in Indonesia 76,000 years ago. And we've restarted before.
Right. It seems like there's definitely been cataclysmic events throughout history. And obviously, I think what I find interesting is they said they found bones of giants in the US and other places, and they've all disappeared, of course. And suddenly nobody could find those, right? It's like, where did the skeletons go? It must be in that warehouse from Indiana Jones where the government's just throwing everything in there, right?
Yeah, they're just hiding it in plain sight. They're putting it in movies, so you think it's all garbage. Really, it's true.
Or to basically desensitize you to the fact that when they do tell you, you're not going to freak out. You're going to be like, well, I saw this back in the 80s. So yeah.
Yep.
Well, yeah, but even David and Goliath in the Bible, right? That was a giant.
Exactly. Yeah.
Everybody knows that story, but nobody seems to even sit there and contemplate. Wait.
Well, the giants.
He was a giant.
The Nephilim, right? That took human women as wives. Everybody's like, oh, that just means giant human, like those are men of renown. That means they had a lot of prestige and stuff. No, they're talking about how big like Nebuchadnezzar's bed was. Like he was a giant, in 8, 9, 12 feet tall, these guys. And
and I've also read, and I don't know how true this is, and that's, I think, more of a theory than anything else, but they said depending on the level of consciousness that's reached, the bigger individuals get. So they said if you're super advanced, you might be like 20 feet tall, as an example. Whereas, as you become more idiotic, you just shrink.
Well, that would explain why the kids nowadays are so short. Them and their cell phones just make them useful idiots. Yeah. They have Black Mirror syndrome on their cell phone.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, it's been an hour and 42 minutes already. Future aspirations.
Awesome.
What topics? Yeah. What topics or guests are you excited to explore in the future, and how do you envision the evolution of your podcast? Before we get out,
I'd like to know how those giants actually mated with our women. Like, how did that all sort of? That's an exciting topic to discuss.
They used a very small turkey baster.
That'll probably get a shadow banned from YouTube for.
We're
that
already
topic.
shadow banned. It don't matter. It doesn't matter.
Egyptian mythology gone wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So we have, one of our guests that's coming up is going to be interesting because she says she has dreams and I think communicates with the Anunnaki, right?
Yes. So
Um,
she had dreams where she was visited by the Anunnaki. She had dreams where she was visited by reptilian races. I myself, through psychedelics, interacted with mantids and other such beings. Yeah. So ultimately, we're going to be talking about that, and we would love to get. And as you say, it took you guys 3 years, and I understand that these guys are very busy, but getting guys like Randall or guys like he's a Mason, and so we're hoping that we can get him or somebody like Neil deGrasse Tyson or somebody. We could talk about quantum entanglement with him and physics and such. We'd love to get some more of these guys around. We started with our friends mostly Masons, guys we knew. They would give of their time and very kindly give of their time for us and kind of move in. That's it.
Yeah,
So,
and I think from a direction perspective, I mean, we just want to continue putting out quality content, fun conversations, getting into really crazy in-depth discussions on various topics. We're trying to help people as well. So,
right.
Individuals on their spiritual journey, just giving them information, a baseline at least, that could help them proceed with that.
We're actually looking forward to coming out with a book too, kind of about the show and about our journey with the show. And Dave and I have been talking about that. So, got a lot of stuff in the works, which we're very excited about.
After Michelle and I had our experience with that UFO triangle thing, that's kind of what we were kind of led to do, I want to say, because this is not something we would normally do in our normal lives. But it was to let people know, hey, you've seen these things or whatever. You're safe to tell us about it, and if you want to get your story out there, we'll keep your identity, totally hidden if you want or whatever. But just so you know, she has a master's degree over there. I have a bachelor's degree in science, right? And this stuff happened to us together.
No,
and
100%.
if it wasn't, and if it wasn't for her being with me, I wouldn't be doing this by myself. And I don't think she would be either. I would just run away from it. I would honestly, all the stuff I've dealt with in the military and all of this stuff does not compare to what I felt jumping out of airplanes and helicopters. Never frightened me like this thing did. And it was no reason it should have been there. So, big middle finger to that thing that told me I didn't, or we didn't belong. Get away. No. You're the one that doesn't belong. You're 12 miles from Detroit Metro Airport. Why are you popping in here?
Not even 12 miles.
Yeah. Like 150 feet above the ground,
But Wayne, let's give that thing a little bit of credit because it started you on this journey. There's something to be said for that too, right? So
yeah.
Well, and that's it, right? So it's a double-edged sword kind of a thing,
Brian, that's gross.
What do you do now?
He said, "Well, a couple
that get
together, stays together."
No, Brian, there was none of that, sir. We had no missing time or anything, So, but leave it to Brian.
Yeah, I'm sure he's gonna. I'm sure you're gonna get that on Wednesday. That's for sure.
Probably, and 1,000 times worse.
Yeah. Well, the gloves will come off on that podcast. So
no, we're excited to have folks watch a show. In part because we've designed it to be of use. We've designed it to be of help. We've designed it to be like an educational discovery sort of journey for folks that want to learn more about stuff or want to hear debates about this thing. Not that it's academic really in any way, but as interactive, as cool as we can make it, that we want to get the knowledge out there. We want to get the light and spread that around and get guys to think about it. we were over at Dave and I were over at our buddy Jerry's house. Now, I don't want to out Jerry because he's world renowned. He's got like PhD upon PhD in a particular scientific thing, and he works for Big Pharma and that kind of whole thing. But he is and he's world renowned. He's written tons of books on all kinds of sciencey stuff. And we started talking to him. It's like me and Dave are like influencing him to think about metaphysics in a different way. And this guy's like a world-renowned expert in science. And he's just like, you know what? You cracked my brain a little bit and you got me thinking a little bit more about, well, how does metaphysics apply to physics, actual physics proper? And how does that really reverberate out in the world? So, yeah.
Well, people talk about, crashed UFOs and retrieval and backwards engineering and stuff like that. Just get one of your guys, like your friend right there. Just get a couple of these guys to see one of these things and know that we don't have something like that. All they got to do is see it, and it snaps something in their head, and they go, well, if they can do it, we can figure out something here.
Well, how do you know it's not ours? Because a lot of people are saying, well, obviously the Black Manta is ours. It's based on otherworldly technology, I would say, but I think it's ours. And one of the things to think about with aliens in a smart way is it's not that they're extraterrestrial. It's that they're extra dimensional, at least a lot of them, which means they exist in the same space we exist in, but on another level. And that was brought to the fore by Bashar as channeled by Daryl Anka, if you guys know Daryl. And he talks about the same thing, like, there's worlds that are sort of on top of each other, and their version of Earth is in another dimension from ours. So it's very interesting.
Well, that's the same thing with the paranormal, right? The paranormal overlaps with our world as well, but we just don't see it for the most part, or some people don't anyway.
Yeah.
But with all that being said, that's one thing I've always, especially in the paranormal realm, I've always just tried to approach things scientifically and try to debunk things. It's not like something you see on TV where it's just like, oh my God, I saw a shadow. It's like, that was definitely a ghost. Like, try to figure out, it's like, was it actually legitimate, or, was there a shadow produced for something in the room or whatever else?
Right.
Try to turn off your cell phone and leave it outside so it's not interfering with any EMF readers and things of that nature. So, I think it's important to take the right approach to it. And, obviously you want to find as much information as possible, document things, but if it's not there, it's not there. You try to take a picture and you don't capture anything. Like, oh, well.
Yeah. Yep. Well, all right, guys, it's getting late here and we got an early morning. So we want to thank you once again for coming on the show. Everybody, it is Brothers of the Arcana, and jump on over. Their links are in the show description and everything. Go check them out. They had some great guests already, and you definitely want to check that out. So
we'd love to have you guys on the show sometime too, and return the favor.
Absolutely.
Look forward to that. So let's definitely work on that. And thank you for your time. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so
just
much.
hit us up with the email, and we'll get you penciled in somewhere. So
beautiful. Sounds like a plan.
Good.
All right, guys.
Thank you all.
Take care of yourself.
Thank you. All right, Michelle.
Where'd it go?
Where are you?
Where'd it go?
I don't know.
There I am.
Hey, you're back. All right.
Oh, it's going to be an early morning, but I'm telling you.
It is. That was a lot of fun. These guys are great. So
yeah, chat was fun too, considering some of those comments. I almost had to shut my camera off.
Yeah, I leave it to Brian, right?
I'm telling you. Wednesday's going to be a hoot.
Yeah, so everybody that's listening, so April 1st, which is Tuesday, we're going to be on Dark Hour Paranormal with our good buddy Michael Roser, talking paranormal, UFOs, and all that good stuff. And then Wednesday night, we're going to be on with Sir Brian Bowden over there at Third Eye Live. So make sure you check that out. And I will put up links and stuff in all of our socials for that. So, okay, everybody, with that, want to say good night. Thank you, guys. Everybody that's here watching, the new subs, all of that. thank you very much. Make sure you hit that like button, and we're going to get out of here. What do you think, Michelle? You ready?
Have a great night, everyone.
Have a great night. And remember, keep those eyes to that
Sky.
sky.